Bienvenido a Oscuras Revelaciones. Este es el santuario oscuro, donde la luna es testigo de secretos inconfesables y verdades perturbadoras. Aquí se desvelan historias tan sombrías y desgarradoras que desafían cualquier límite humano. Cada relato que escucharás te sumergirá más profundamente en un mundo donde el horror se manifiesta sin restricciones, donde las verdades más crueles son reveladas bajo el amparo siniestro de la oscuridad eterna. Prepárate, porque una vez que empieces a escuchar, ya no habrá vuelta atrás. Tuesday, 9:17 p.m., and the digital photograph bloomed onto my laptop screen. A tremor originated deep in my wrist, traveling upward until my whole hand vibrated against the cool plastic. There I lay, rendered in pixels, undeniably me, slack-jawed in sleep. The familiar cerulean quilt hugged my chest, precisely as it did every night. Beyond my sleeping form, the bedroom window framed a square of impenetrable night sky. According to the metadata etched beneath the image, this violation occurred 3 days prior, time-stamped 3:44 a.m. I inhabit this space alone. This compact one-bedroom has been solely mine for 4 years running. The camera responsible, a sleek digital thing, had languished forgotten in my desk drawer for weeks, disturbed only for my excursion to the Colorado Peaks the previous weekend. A sudden drought claimed my throat as I cycled through the stored images again. 68 captures resided on the memory card. 57 fragments of Rocky Mountain grandeur, 10 documenting a convivial brewery tour in Denver, and then this solitary, impossible portrait of my slumber. The camera's internal logic showed an unbroken sequence, no suspicious gaps, no digital deletions. My legs, suddenly unreliable, propelled me upward from the desk chair. The air thickened, the room shrinking around me. I lurched towards the bedroom, fingers fumbling with the deadbolt. Secure. The security chain hung undisturbed in its bracket. Next, the windows, each one inspected, latched firmly from within, screens untouched, inviolate. A frantic drummer took residence in my ribcage, its beat hammering against the base of my throat. Retreating to the laptop, I summoned the image once more, magnifying its details with obsessive clicks. Crystal clarity, captured from perhaps 6 feet away, precisely at the foot of my bed. The angle suggested someone standing, camera held steady at chest height. The timestamp. It had to be corrupted. No other explanation held water. Yet scrutinizing the adjacent photos from my trip offered no solace. Dates and times aligned perfectly with my memories. There was the dawn painting, the mountain ridges Saturday morning, my friend Leo's grinning thumbs up at the brewery entrance that afternoon, the majestic elk we'd startled on Sunday's trail. Everything accounted for, chronologically sound. Ignoring the late hour, I dialed Leo. His voice, thick with sleep, mumbled, "Hello? Leo, I need you to verify something. Remember the brewery Saturday? What time did we actually arrive?" "Elias, what is this?" "Please," I interrupted, urgency sharpening my tone. "Just check your phone photos, the timestamp." A rustling silence, then, shows 2:15 p.m. Got a selfie right out front. A perfect match to my camera's log. The system hadn't malfunctioned. I disconnected without further explanation, the dial tone buzzing against my ear. A frantic search followed. Closets flung open, the shadowed void beneath the bed probed. Nothing amiss. No tangible sign of intrusion. Yet, the chilling certainty remained. Someone had breached my sanctuary while I slept. They had located my camera within the desk, stood over my unconscious form, captured that image, and then meticulously restored everything to its original state. Remaining here felt impossible. Keys, wallet, shoes, the ritual of departure enacted on autopilot. But halfway to the door, I froze. What if they hadn't left? What if unseen eyes tracked my movements, anticipating this very flight? My hand trembled as it retrieved my phone, dialing the 3 digits that felt both inadequate and essential. 911, state your emergency. I need to report a break-in. The voice that emerged felt alien, stretched thin and high. Someone entered my apartment while I was asleep. They photographed me. Are you in immediate danger, sir? Is the individual still present? I don't know. I don't believe so. But they were definitely here. 3 days ago. I only just discovered the picture. The dispatcher calmly collected my details, promising officers would investigate. I remained tethered to the line, a sentinel in my own brightly lit living room, flinching at the apartment's familiar symphony, the refrigerator's low drone, the hiss of tires on wet pavement outside, the building's ancient heating system groaning to life. 15 minutes stretched into an eternity before 2 officers arrived. Officer Kwan, young, sharp-featured, possessed an unnerving focus. His partner, Officer Davies, was older, broader, his temples dusted with gray. They conducted a methodical sweep while I waited, exiled to the hallway. No indication of forced entry, Davies reported upon their return. Doors, windows secure. Locks and frames show no tampering. I presented the photograph on my laptop. Kwan leaned close, his gaze analytical, while Davies made notations in a small pad. And you're positive nobody else holds a key? Davies inquired, his tone professionally neutral. Friends, family, recent maintenance calls, landlord access. No one, I insisted. The only visitor in the last month was Leo, and he was physically with me in Colorado when this was taken. They took my statement, documented the digital evidence, yet an air of polite skepticism radiated from them. Viewed objectively, it must have seemed negligible. One peculiar photo, no theft, no damage, no entry point. They pledged to file a report, increase patrols, but conceded that without concrete evidence, their options were limited. After their departure, silence descended, thick and suffocating. I sat hunched at my desk, the photograph mocking me from the screen. My sleeping face, utterly vulnerable, oblivious to the unseen presence mere feet away. Mechanically, I began sifting through my digital life, searching for other anomalies. Browser history, mundane. Email logs, unremarkable. Phone records, standard, until my stomach plummeted. An outgoing call, logged 3 days ago at 3:41 a.m., mere moments before the photograph was captured. The number was unfamiliar, unsaved. My fingers, slick with sweat, transcribed the digits onto a notepad. An online search yielded nothing, a ghost number. The impulse to dial it flared, then died. What if they answered? What words could possibly bridge that abyss? Explanations chased each other through my mind. Sleepwalking. I'd never exhibited such behavior. A forgotten spare key. Given to whom? And for what purpose? The questions multiplied, breeding unease. How did they pinpoint the camera's location? How did they navigate my bedroom, mere feet away, without stirring me? I sleep lightly. The faintest disturbance usually jolts me awake. Around 4 a.m., adrenaline finally ceded ground to profound weariness. Sleep was a necessity, yet the thought of my own bed induced a visceral revulsion. Dragging a blanket and pillow to the living room couch, I positioned myself strategically, granting a view of both the front door and the shadowed hallway leading to the bedroom. Consciousness must have slipped away, for sunlight striking my face startled me awake. A fleeting moment of normalcy shattered as the previous night's terror surged back. I called in sick to work, the lie tasting metallic on my tongue. The morning became a blur of frantic fortification. A locksmith, bemused by my insistence on both a high-security deadbolt and a keypad lock, worked on the door. Security cameras were ordered online, one for every room, every potential entry point. While awaiting their delivery, I delved deeper into the mystery call. Dialing the number led only to a generic synthesized voicemail prompt. A paid reverse lookup service proved equally fruitless, an unregistered prepaid device. That night, the bedroom remained forbidden territory. I huddled on the couch again, laptop a constant companion, compulsively revisiting the photograph, the call log, praying for some overlooked clue to surface. The ensuing days dissolved into a haze of corrosive vigilance and bone-deep fatigue. The cameras arrived and were installed with feverish haste, their electronic eyes positioned to surveil every angle. Checking the feeds became an obsessive ritual. I developed a new habit, photographing each room before leaving, comparing the images upon return, hunting for infinitesimal displacements. My friends noticed the shift. Leo's calls grew more concerned. Elias, what's going on? That weird call about the brewery photos. How could I articulate the madness? It sounded unhinged even within the confines of my own skull. Someone broke in just to take my picture while I slept. A week crawled by. While reviewing the security footage for the 100th time, a flicker caught my eye. The camera monitoring the bedroom window. 2:13 a.m. A brief, indistinct shadow flitted across the glass, rewinding, playing frame by frame. Something dark, too rapid to identify, but undeniably there. Another call to the police yielded only frustration. The footage, they explained patiently, was too ambiguous, lacking evidentiary value. Officer Kwan, his voice tinged with something akin to pity, gently suggested counseling, offering the number for a mental health service. His suggestion was ignored. Instead, I escalated my defenses. Motion sensors affixed to every window pane, a small safe purchased solely for the camera and its memory cards. A baseball bat became my incongruous bedside companion on the couch. 2 weeks post-discovery, I was barely functional. Work attendance was sporadic, appetite non-existent. Sleep, when it came, was fractured by nightmares. Waking paralyzed, a figure looming, camera lens gleaming. Then, the second photograph manifested. I found it during my nightly ritual of checking the camera's memory card before securing it in the safe. Timestamp, 4:12 a.m. That very morning. It depicted me asleep on the living room couch, cocooned in the blanket, the laptop's faint glow illuminating my face. My meticulously installed cameras showed nothing. The motion sensors remained silent. The new, expensive locks were untouched. But the true horror lay in the details. Zooming in, I could discern the image displayed on the laptop screen within the photo. It was the first picture, the one of me in bed. This second violation wasn't random. It was a message. I see you. I see your fear. The apartment became utterly untenable. A hastily packed bag, a taxi ride across town, the sterile anonymity of a hotel room. Yet, even there, safety felt illusory. As I sat on the edge of the unfamiliar bed, a new, chilling thought surfaced. What if I was followed? What if this apparent refuge was just another stage? I called Leo, the dam finally breaking. I recounted everything, the words tumbling out in a torrent of fear and exhaustion. He listened, blessedly silent, then insisted I come stay with him and his wife Anya. I agreed, extracting a promise of absolute secrecy. The following morning, I returned to my apartment for essentials. The moment the key turned, a wrongness permeated the air. Nothing was overtly disturbed, yet the atmosphere felt altered. Bat clutched tight, I moved through the rooms, a predator stalking ghosts in my own home. Closet doors yielded nothing. Furniture remained unmoved. Everything appeared normal until the bedroom. There, resting against my pillow, sat my camera. The camera I had deliberately left locked in the safe before fleeing to the hotel. I checked the safe. Still locked, combination undisturbed. The security feeds revealed no entry, no presence. The sensors hadn't tripped. Yet, impossibly, someone had been inside. Again. My hand shook so violently I could barely grasp the camera. Powering it on, navigating to the memory card felt like wading through molasses. A new image waited, time-stamped barely an hour before my arrival. It showed my empty hotel room, the rumpled bed covers, my overnight bag slumped on the floor, the phone plugged into the wall socket by the nightstand. The camera slipped from my nerveless fingers, clattering onto the floor. I fled. Down the hallway, through the lobby, bursting into the daylight, not stopping until I reached my car. As the engine roared to life, my phone vibrated. A text message from an unknown number. A single attachment. A photograph of me, captured moments ago, sprinting through the apartment building's lobby, evidently taken from hiding near the main entrance. I drove directly to the police station. Officer Kwan listened this time, the professional mask replaced by genuine concern. Units were dispatched to both my apartment and the hotel. My camera, my phone, confiscated as evidence. Fingerprint dust settled like gray snow. DNA swabs were taken. Hotel staff and neighbors endured interviews. The result? Nothing. No prints but my own. No foreign DNA. No anomalies on any security footage. The hotel staff reported nothing unusual. The number that sent the text, already disconnected, vanished into the ether. That was 3 months ago. I reside now in the quiet sanctuary of Leo and Anya's spare room. My cameras are gone, disposed of. My phone number is new. A therapist specializing in trauma guides me through the wreckage twice a week. Progress, she calls it. Yet, sleep remains elusive, preceded by ritualistic checks of locks and latches. Doubt sometimes whispers, was it a delusion? A psychological fracture? Is there a mundane explanation obscured by my terror? But then, the memory of that first photograph surfaces. My own face, peaceful, utterly exposed. And the certainty returns. Someone, somewhere, possesses a collection of unseen images. Someone capable of breaching any barrier without a trace. Someone who is perhaps still watching, patiently waiting to reveal the next frame. I don't capture moments anymore. Tape obscures my phone's lens. I've adapted, uneasily, to the perpetual sensation of being observed. But every night, drifting in the liminal space before sleep claims me, I brace myself, wondering if morning will bring a fresh horror. And sometimes, in that fragile quiet, I could swear I hear it, the almost imperceptible click of a shutter closing in the dark. The day bled out across the skeletal remains of Redemption Gap, bathing splintered wood and rusted metal in hues of bruised plum and dying ember. Long shadows stretched, skeletal fingers clawing at the dust. Through my viewfinder, I framed the desolation, seeking its ravaged heart, oblivious to the abyss yawning just beyond the lens, ready to swallow whole my tidy map of the real. My name is Ilara. My peculiar vocation? A cartographer of oblivion, tracing the contours of forgotten places for an audience hungry for vicarious decay. Ghost towns are my cathedrals. An exquisite melancholy clings to these monuments of failed avarice, these husks left to the wind and the sun. This particular dereliction, Redemption Gap, sequestered deep in the arid cradle of the Southwest, had been a coveted entry on my atlas of ruin for years. A silver boomtown bled dry, they said, almost instantaneously around mid-century. Depleted veins were the official explanation, yet whispers persisted, murmuring of shadows and sudden silence. I'd timed my arrival for the gloaming, chasing the spectral light perfect for my chronicles of decay. Redemption Gap offered a feast for the lens, facades weathered to the texture of old bones, mining relics consumed by rust, tumbleweeds performing their lonely ballet down the main thoroughfare, choked with decades of dust. It felt less like a place and more like a pause in time. Yet, as I moved through the empty streets, documenting the stillness, a dissonance hummed beneath the silence. The quiet was too absolute, the stillness too profound. Even ruins typically breathe with the skitter of unseen life, the sigh of wind through broken panes. Here, the air itself seemed petrified, holding a breath it never released. I dismissed the prickling unease as the residue of local folklore, my imagination overstimulated. As the final sliver of sun vanished behind the jagged peaks, I resolved to retreat to my solitary camp on the outskirts. It was then I caught it, a flicker, a tremor at the edge of sight. I spun, camera poised, nothing but the deepening twilight painting the empty street. A trick of fading light, I reasoned, my pulse quickening nonetheless. Then, again, higher up this time, framed in the grimy window of the structure that once proclaimed itself the town's hotel. My heart commenced a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Decades spent navigating the thresholds of decay had yielded nothing truly inexplicable. But this fleeting motion felt dissonant, wrong. Against the rising tide of primal fear warred the insatiable curiosity that fueled my work. This hint of the uncanny was precisely the currency my followers craved. I found myself drawn towards the hotel, its sign groaning a protest against a breeze I couldn't feel. The main door hung slack-jawed, nudged by an invisible hand on corroded hinges. A moment's hesitation, a breath held tight, then I crossed the threshold. Floorboards screamed under my boots. Inside, decay reigned. Wallpaper peeled in strips like sunburnt skin. Fractured furniture lay scattered. Dust motes waltzed in the narrow beam of my flashlight. Is anyone there? My voice, unnaturally loud, was swallowed by the cavernous space. Silence answered. Yet, as my vision pierced the gloom, a detail snagged my attention. The thick blanket of dust coating every surface lay immaculate, undisturbed, save for a distinct trail of footprints ascending the main staircase. Recent footprints. A cold fist clenched around my heart. I followed the impossible trail, each creaking step pulling me deeper into the anomaly, further from the known world. The upper floor presented a long corridor flanked by doors, most hanging brokenly. One, however, at the corridor's terminus, remained shut. As I neared it, a sound prickled the hairs on my neck. Voices, low, indistinct, yet undeniably conversational, leaking from behind the closed door. I froze, caught between instinct's frantic command to flee and the chronicler's compulsion to uncover. The need to know, the engine of my entire existence, won out. My hand, slick with nervous sweat, closed around the tarnished knob. It yielded with spectral quietude. The portal swung inward, revealing not the expected ruin, but an impossibility. A parlor, pristine, plucked whole from the 1950s. Polished wood gleamed softly. Around a formica table sat 5 figures, clad in the fashions of a bygone decade, their chatter abruptly ceasing. 5 pairs of eyes swung towards me, mirroring surprise, yet beneath it, a profound, unsettling hunger flickered. "Ah," breathed the man, his mustache a sharp, dark line above a smile too wide, too white. "Company at last." I recoiled, stumbling backward, my thoughts fracturing. A concussion, some potent hallucination born of isolation and suggestion. But as I retreated, they rose in unison and began to advance, their movements possessing a hideous synchronicity, less human stride, more the jerky shuffle of puppets whose strings were pulled taut by something unseen. I turned and fled, the frantic drumming in my ears drowning out all else. I could hear their pursuit, the rhythmic echo of their steps in the corridor. Reaching the stairs, I risked a backward glance, a glance that fractured my sanity. Their forms were dissolving, melting. Flesh ran like tallow, reforming into things elongated, nightmarish. Smiles stretched into impossible maws, bristling with needle teeth. Limbs stretched and thinned into spider-like appendages. I plunged down the staircase, nearly tumbling in my terror, bursting out into the street, lungs burning, gasping the cool night air. But the street was no longer empty. The nightmare had spilled outdoors. From doorways and shadowed alleys, figures emerged, undergoing the same grotesque metamorphosis I had witnessed within the hotel. The entire spectral populace of Redemption Gap, whatever these entities were, was converging, drawn to me like moths to a fatal flame. Panic dictated my flight. I ran without direction, seeking only the sanctuary of my vehicle, escape from this waking madness. A wrong turn. I found myself trapped in a cul-de-sac choked with the iron corpses of mining endeavors, looming like rusted titans. As I spun, bracing for the inevitable, a soundless voice bloomed in the space around me, resonant, ancient, woven from dust and distance. "You sought the forgotten searcher." It resonated within my skull. "We have awaited your lens, your gaze." The creatures halted their advance, arraying themselves in a silent, watchful semicircle. The central figure, vaguely recognizable as the man from the parlor, glided forward. Its face was now a vortex of shifting shadows, yet the voice emanating from it held a chilling calm. "Bound here, trapped by currents you cannot fathom. We linger, tethered to this decaying shell. But you, your seeking eye, your machine that steals moments, you offer release." I flattened myself against the cold metal wall, desperate for distance. "What are you?" The question tore from my raw throat. The shadow face contorted into a horrifying semblance of a grin. "We are the residue, the echo of forgotten prayers, the stain left by vanished lives. We are the consequence of abandonment, and you, seeker, shall become one with the stillness. A warped hand extended, fingers attenuating like smoke tendrils. I squeezed my eyes shut, anticipating oblivion. Instead, a gentle warmth bloomed across my face. Opening my eyes, I found myself sprawled on the dusty earth just outside the town limits. The nascent sun peered over the mountain ridge. My camera lay beside me, its screen fractured but alive. With trembling hands, I navigated the images captured the previous evening. Deserted streets, decaying structures, the expected portfolio of ruin. Until the final frame. It showed the hotel room, precisely as I'd witnessed it, immaculately furnished, occupied by the 5 smiling figures in their period attire. But their eyes were voids, perfect circles of absolute black, fixed upon the point of capture with an unnerving, possessive intensity. I scrambled upright, sprinting towards my vehicle, driving until Redemption Gap was a mere speck in the rearview mirror, then nothing at all. I have never returned. The full account, that final damning photograph, they remained buried until this telling. My explorations continue. The chronicles of decay still find their audience, but a new caution shadows my steps, an awareness that the specters we hunt can possess a terrible reality, hungry to swell their spectral ranks. And sometimes, in the quiet solitude of late-night editing, faint whispers seem to coil around the edges of hearing. Familiar voices calling my name, issuing a soft invitation back to that place where time fractures and the forgotten things stir in the deep shadows, eternally waiting. That first nocturnal disturbance remains etched sharp in memory. Not long after settling into this pile of venerable brick, where ancient wooden sashes sighed against the wind, I lay suspended between waking and sleep. Then came the sound. A coarse, heavy grating dragged across the floorboards directly overhead. It jolted me upright, my pulse instantly a frantic drum against my ribs. The sheer volume of it was startling. My immediate attempt to categorize it, settling foundations, rambunctious neighbors, faltered as the noise persisted. A measured tread followed, heavy footfalls pacing the expanse of the unit above, end to end. Each step seemed deliberate, resonant, making the aged plaster ceiling above me tremble minutely. I felt a subtle vibration hum through my mattress. A knot tightened low in my belly. Logically, it was a new tenant, perhaps wrestling with furniture, engaging in some late-night domestic rearrangement. Yet, an unsettling rhythm underscored the movements, a consistency that felt less like haphazard effort and more like a prescribed path being traced again and again. My own dwelling occupies the 3rd level of this 4-story edifice. It's a modest space, a single bedroom, a living area more corridor than room, flanked by those same time-worn windows that slam with concussive force if left unsecured by a wedge. The building itself is a relic, famed for its robust, almost fortress-like construction. Residents often boasted of the thick walls, barriers supposedly impervious to the sounds of adjacent lives. Yet, inexplicably, every scrape, every thud, every footstep from the apartment directly above permeated my sanctuary. Initially, beyond a flicker of irritation, I dismissed the first occurrence, but the phenomenon recurred, night after night, adhering to a schedule as rigid as a metronome. 11 o'clock. Sometimes it was the distinct groan of furniture being shoved across floorboards. Other times, a sharp impact, like something substantial dropped, followed by a sequence of low, dull thumps that echoed down through the ceiling joists. Mornings occasionally brought glimpses of him, Mr. Silas Thorne from the fourth floor, slipping into the elevator's cage, clad invariably in a suit. A typical city functionary, weariness etched around his eyes, an unremarkable haircut, haste in his stride. I'd angle for eye contact, offer a tentative greeting. A curt nod was the usual reply, perhaps a mumbled "morning" swallowed by the hallway's hush. Our paths rarely crossed. My work kept me home, while he departed before the sun fully asserted itself, returning long after dark. Did my own muffled television bother him? Unlikely, I'd reasoned, remembering the legendary thickness of these walls. We were fortunate, supposedly, to exist in such proximal silence. Except, I wasn't. Every night, the ceiling above me became a resonant membrane. I began to anticipate the clock striking 11. Why that specific hour held significance, I couldn't fathom, but its approach invariably brought a tightening in my chest. Curled on my sofa, attempting distraction with a screen or a book, my focus would inevitably fray. Concentration became impossible, usurped by the knowledge of what was imminent. And then, punctual as a tide, the footsteps would commence, slow, heavy, planting one after the other. Brief pauses punctuated the rhythm, followed by that unmistakable sound, something cumbersome being dragged. It conjured images of a heavy table, a solid wooden chest being laboriously repositioned, the low, abrasive scraping noise, then another volley of thumps rattling the glass shade of my ceiling lamp. By then, sleep was a distant memory, my heart hammering an erratic rhythm against my ribs, palms slick with a nervous sweat. Ignore it, I told myself repeatedly. Perhaps Mr. Thorne was plagued by restlessness, an insomniac pacing his confines, or possessed by a nocturnal urge to redesign his living space. But the sounds lacked the randomness of typical activity. They felt too purposeful, too ritualistic. This auditory intrusion would persist for roughly an hour, sometimes slightly more, sometimes less, before ceasing with the same abruptness with which it began. In the ensuing silence, I'd lie rigid, anticipating a resurgence, straining to catch any further scrape or stomp. Sleep, when it came, was shallow, often shattered by a phantom thud that left me breathless and wide-eyed. My existence settled into a disquieting loop. Diurnal quiet, nocturnal clamor, morning's deceptive normality. One night, frayed patience snapped. Midnight struck. Clad in pajamas but pulling on shoes, I snatched a flashlight, the corridor illumination being notoriously fickle, and resolved to confront the source. Stepping out of my apartment, however, plunged me into an unnerving stillness. The hallway was profoundly silent, save for the low electric hum of the overhead fluorescent tubes. No footsteps echoed from above, no scraping, no dragging. It felt like stepping into a vacuum. I hesitated by the elevator, the urge to retreat strong, but adrenaline propelled me forward. I pressed the button, ascended one floor. The doors slid open onto an identical empty corridor. No sliver of light beneath Mr. Thorne's door, no murmur of activity within. I approached his apartment, number 4B, and knocked, first tentatively, then with more force. Silence answered. Pressing my ear to the cool wood, I listened intently. Nothing. Not the faintest whisper of breath, no muffled radio, no creak of floorboards. After a minute of futile listening, I retreated, descending back to my own floor. The moment my head touched the pillow, the familiar symphony resumed overhead. Dragging, stomping, more dragging. My eyes flew open. A cold, prickling sensation crawled up the back of my neck. I glanced at the clock. 11:20 p.m. Tentative inquiries with neighbors on my floor yielded nothing. Some swore by earplugs. Others claimed blissful ignorance of any unusual sounds. Mr. Henderson, the building superintendent, offered a weary shrug. Thick walls, he'd repeated, the mantra of the building. Maybe a shared beam or plumbing. Pipes make funny noises sometimes. His advice, ignore it. For a time, I tried. Then, approximately 3 weeks ago, a new peculiarity surfaced. I hadn't seen Mr. Thorne in days. A business trip, I assumed. Yet, the 11 o'clock performance continued unabated. Furniture scraped, footsteps paced, sporadic thuds punctuated the night, as loud and insistent as ever. One evening, determined to pinpoint the source externally, I waited for the sounds to begin, then dashed into the hallway. Again, absolute silence reigned in the corridor. Nothing. Back inside my apartment, the cacophony from above resumed its predictable cadence. A few days later, Mr. Henderson intercepted me in the lobby. "Say, Alara, you got contact info for the fellow upstairs, Thorne?" he asked, brow furrowed. I shook my head. "Reason I ask," he continued, oblivious. "He moved out. Must be 3, maybe 4 weeks now. Handed in the keys and everything." A cold fist clenched in my gut. Impossible. "But I heard noises," I managed, the words feeling thin. "Last night, from his apartment." Henderson offered a dismissive shrug. "Can't be. Place is empty as a drum." I clamped my jaw shut, the label, hysterical tenant, hovering unspoken between us. A knot of ice formed in my chest, refusing to melt all day. That night, punctually, the noises returned. I sat rigidly in my armchair, gaze fixed on the ceiling, my hands trembling slightly. The floorboards above groaned under the weight of heavy steps. It sounded, disconcertingly, like more than one person moving now, though perhaps it was just the echo, the acoustics of the old structure. The scraping recommenced. My light fixtures swayed gently. Fine particles of dust drifted down from the ceiling corners. My mouth felt parched. A desperate urge to flee warred with a paralyzing dread. The apartment was vacant, confirmed empty, yet the distinct sounds of occupation persisted directly overhead. I tried calling Henderson's mobile. No answer. Pacing my narrow living room, I listened to the relentless thud, thud, thud from above. Police. What would I report? Strange noises emanating from a certified empty unit. My mind raced through improbable scenarios. Squatters finding clandestine entry. Unauthorized contractors working after hours. But the timing, the specific nature of the sounds, dragging furniture at precisely 11 p.m., defied rational explanation. The following afternoon, resolving on a more direct approach, I ascended to the 4th floor during the guaranteed daylight quiet. I tried the doorknob of 4B, locked solid. Pressing my ear against the wood yielded only profound silence. I scanned the hallway window, checked for any signs of forced entry along the doorframe. Nothing. Everything appeared undisturbed, the door coated in a fine layer of dust, the handle cool and inert. A profound unease settled in the pit of my stomach as I stood there, eventually retreating downstairs to the strained normality of my day. Evening arrived. Home from errands around 7, I prepared a simple meal, attempted television as a sedative for my frayed nerves. By 10:30, the familiar tension coiled within me. My heart hammered preemptively. Not a sound yet, but the anticipation was its own torment. Every creak of my own floorboards made me jump. At 10:55 p.m., I extinguished all the lights, plunging the apartment into darkness, and sat on the sofa, listening. Precisely at 11:01 p.m., the first thump resonated, directly above the kitchen area. Another followed, nearer the living room section of the ceiling. The footsteps began their methodical patrol. My breathing grew shallow, a constricting band tightening around my chest. Slipping silently to my front door, I opened it a mere crack, straining to hear any sound from the hallway. Utter silence. Closing the door gently, I returned to the sofa. Above me, the footsteps and scraping continued, undeterred. Switching on my phone's flashlight, I aimed its beam upwards. Tiny flakes of paint detached themselves from the ceiling with each heavy thud. I could feel the vibrations now, traveling down through the structure, humming faintly beneath my feet. Then came a protracted scraping sound, as if a massive object was being dragged the entire length of the apartment above. Gooseflesh prickled my arms. My heart pounded with such force, I felt a pressure building in my ears. I began muttering aloud, fragments of denial. This isn't real. That apartment is empty. The sounds mocked my words, continuing their relentless performance. The tension solidified into a persistent ache between my shoulder blades. Enough. Ignoring it was no longer an option. Grabbing my keys and phone, I stormed into the hallway and took the stairs two at a time, driven by a mixture of terror and fury. I stopped directly outside 4B. My hand trembled as I reached for the doorknob. Locked. I pressed my ear flat against the cold, lifeless wood. Nothing. Absolute silence from within. I stood there, breathing raggedly, mind reeling in confusion. If someone were truly inside, surely I would hear something. A breath, a shuffle, but the only sound was the faint electrical hum of the corridor light. After several moments of strained listening, I turned and descended the stairs, the flashlight beam dancing on the worn treads, illuminating swirling dust motes. Back in my apartment, door locked and bolted, the noises resumed the instant I sank onto the sofa. It defied logic. It was as if the sound existed only within the confines of 4B, yet was audible solely from my apartment below. The next day, I recounted everything to Henderson, emphasizing the impossibility. He reiterated the facts. Vacant unit, keys returned, no access granted to anyone. He fell back on his previous explanations. Old plumbing, settling noises, thermal expansion in the pipes. Explanations that felt insultingly inadequate. I knew the difference between a groaning pipe and the distinct cadence of human footsteps, the grating friction of heavy furniture on wood. Our conversation ended in a stalemate, his expression a mixture of pity and exasperation. I was left feeling utterly alone, frustrated, and increasingly doubtful of my own senses. Sleep became a battleground. I migrated to the living room sofa, leaving the television on low volume, a futile attempt to drown out the inevitable. It barely made a difference. The footsteps and dragging sounds pierced the electronic murmur, vibrating through the ceiling with unwavering intensity each night. Sometimes the sheer anxiety became unbearable, driving me out into the cool night air to walk aimlessly around the block until the trembling subsided. But upon return, the noises were always there, waiting. My appetite dwindled, my stomach perpetually clenched. One night, the dragging sound escalated, becoming incessant. For a full hour, it persisted, a continuous grinding scrape back and forth, back and forth across the floor above. My ceiling light fixture oscillated gently with the vibrations. A certainty grew that something structural was about to give way. My chest felt painfully tight, my forehead beaded with cold sweat. Pacing my apartment, I checked the time compulsively, phone clutched in my hand, ready to call. Who? My hands shook violently. My pulse throbbed visibly in my neck. Around midnight, the scraping abruptly ceased. The footsteps slowed, faded into silence. I collapsed onto the floor, utterly drained, caught between the terrifying reality of what I heard and the chilling possibility that my mind was fabricating it all. But the vibrations felt too real. Contacting the unit's owner seemed the next logical step, but Henderson guarded that information fiercely, likely classifying me as a nuisance by now. The fleeting, desperate thought of breaking in, just to see, to prove the emptiness, or confront whatever resided there, flickered and died. The potential consequences, the sheer irrationality of it, held me back. So now, I sit here, night after night, waiting. The sounds always commence. Mr. Thorne is long gone. The unit is verifiably empty. Yet, the phantom tenancy continues its nocturnal rituals without fail. I feel trapped in this auditory purgatory. Part of me yearns to charge upstairs, force the lock, and confront the void or whatever occupies it. Another, more primal part whispers that some doors are best left unopened, some mysteries better left unsolved. Perhaps ignorance is a fragile shield I should cling to. But the noises show no sign of abating. If anything, their duration lengthens, their onset creeping earlier, sometimes starting around 10:30, stretching past midnight. Sleep is a luxury I rarely attain. My thoughts fragment. The throb in my temple begins hours before the first sound, a Pavlovian response to the impending dread. Each morning reveals darker circles beneath my eyes, a persistent ache deep in my chest. Sharing this with friends feels impossible. The fear of being labeled unstable, overwrought, silences me. Yet, denial is a crumbling fortress. Should I sever ties with this place, absorb the cost and disruption of moving? This old building, with its cheap rent, suddenly feels exorbitant, the price measured in sanity, not dollars. But finances are tight, so I remain, night after night, an unwilling audience to the inexplicable. It's 5 minutes to the hour now. 11 looms. I sit hunched at my small kitchen table, knuckles white around a cold mug, this account spilling onto the screen as a frantic testament. The anticipation itself is a physical weight. My own breathing sounds unnaturally loud. A tremor starts in my hands. I swallow against a dry throat. The window pane shivers with a passing gust, a mundane sound that does nothing to mask the deeper silence, the charged stillness before. And there, a faint settling sound from above, punctual as a death knell. My heart leaps, a frantic bird against my ribs. A slow, deliberate tread resonates through the plaster. Thump. Then again. Thump. The cheap fixture above my head quivers, shedding infinitesimal dust motes. My chest constricts. And now, the scraping begins. That long, drawn-out groan of weight dragged across bare wood, vibrating not just through the ceiling, but through the very marrow of my bones. My hands fly to my ears, a useless gesture. The sound penetrates, visceral, immediate. My lungs feel compressed. My mind races, a frantic scramble for an explanation that refuses to form. A chill crawls up my spine. I don't know what makes these noises. A lingering presence? A structural anomaly manifesting in terrifyingly specific ways? Or am I somehow uniquely attuned to the building's spectral echoes? It feels terrifyingly real. I feel it in my bones. What is the next step? Ascend the stairs again? Force the issue? Risk Henderson's final dismissal, perhaps even eviction? Or continue this nightly vigil, pretending the sounds above are mere figments, tricks of the old building's settling frame? Right now, the footsteps are heavy, relentless. My ceiling creaks protest beneath each impact. The scraping noise intensifies, louder tonight than ever before. A ringing starts in my ears. Exhaustion battles fear. I possess no tangible proof, only the unwavering certainty of my senses. Something is up there. Something paces and drags furniture within the confines of a locked, empty apartment. Henderson insists it's vacant. It should be empty. But the noise is undeniable, inescapable, and it shows no sign of stopping. This is my reality now. No harm has come to me, not physically. No one else corroborates my experience. I am isolated in this haunting. Sleep deprivation gnaws at me. I cannot continue like this, yet the thought of confronting whatever resides or lingers upstairs paralyzes me. Not yet. For now, I sit here, hands shaking, jaw clenched, listening to the steady, impossible thud of footsteps overhead. Maybe tomorrow, maybe never. I truly don't know. All I can do is endure, night after night, waiting for that first resonant thump just after 11. And so it continues. A season of fractures, of frayed edges, and hollowed-out days had driven Elias to seek solace in solitude. The city's incessant hum, the press of bodies, the weight of expectation, it demanded escape. Thus, he pointed his car towards wilderness, hours unspooling behind him until pavement yielded to dirt track, leading him to a secluded haven cradled by dense timberland, far from any echo of another soul. This isolation, profound and enveloping, was precisely the balm he craved. Only the ancient conversation of the woods for company. He pitched his small shelter in a clearing kissed by a meandering stream, the canvas a lonely sentinel against the looming trees. The ritual of unpacking, methodical and grounding, bled into an afternoon spent tracing deer paths, immersing himself in the green cathedral. Sunlight filtered through the canopy, dappling the forest floor in shifting mosaics. Birdsong stitched the silence, leaves whispered secrets on the breeze, and with each step, the knots of tension within him seemed to loosen, fiber by fiber. Dusk arrived, soft-footed, painting the sky in bruised purples and fading oranges. Exhaustion, clean and welcome, settled deep in his bones. Beside a crackling fire, diminutive against the encroaching night, he nursed a simple meal, mesmerized by the flame's hypnotic dance. Beyond the fire's flickering perimeter lay an absolute dark, profound and impenetrable. The nearby stream murmured its constant lullaby, punctuated by the distant spectral cry of an owl. Otherwise, stillness reigned. Hours dissolved as Elias surrendered to the fire's glow, thoughts drifting like smoke, untethered. A rare clarity surfaced, a sense of breathing room earned after long confinement. He was, finally, utterly alone with the landscape of his own mind. As embers pulsed low, he fed the fire a few more branches, leaned back, and let a heavy, peaceful drowsiness claim him. Then, a subtle dissonance threaded through the night's harmony. Faint, almost subliminal, a rustle originating somewhere in the black void beyond the firelight's reach. It pricked his awareness, dissolving the tranquil haze. Elias sat upright, senses straining, attempting to pass the sound above the fire's gentle hiss, an animal, perhaps, a foraging creature of the night. Yet, the quality was different, measured, deliberate, like careful footfalls navigating the undergrowth, striving for stealth. A cold fist clenched around his heart. His gaze swept the Stygian boundary, finding only shifting shadows and the impassive faces of trees. Nothing, he insisted internally. Just the woods settling, imagination kindled by the dark. But the conviction felt hollow. An undeniable awareness prickled his skin. Something unseen lingered just past the light, its attention fixed upon him. He remained poised, a statue carved from attention, listening into the profound silence that followed. Minutes stretched, taut and expectant. The sound did not return. A slow exhale escaped his lips, air he hadn't known he was holding. See? Nothing. He commanded his muscles to relax, grasping for the serenity that had been his only moments before. But it had evaporated, replaced by a creeping disquiet. The comforting solitude now felt like stark vulnerability. The darkness, once a blanket, now seemed a predatory shroud, closing in. The impulse to build the fire high, a beacon against the unknown, warred with the instinct to remain small, unnoticed. He let the flames dwindle, a shrinking island of light, and watched the shadows lengthen and writhe. Eventually, the chill drove him towards the flimsy refuge of his tent. After dousing the last embers, ensuring the entrance was securely fastened, he burrowed into his sleeping bag. Sleep, however, remained elusive. He lay suspended in the blackness, acutely attuned to the forest's nocturnal symphony. Every snapped twig became a footstep, every sigh of wind through the pines a breath held close. His pulse hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the quiet. He must have succumbed to sheer weariness, for awareness returned with a jolt, a soft friction against the tent fabric right beside his head. He bolted upright, heart slamming, every nerve ending alight. Silence, then again, a delicate scraping caress, as if something traced the canvas contours. Fumbling in the suffocating dark, his fingers finally closed around the cold cylinder of his flashlight. With trembling hands, he thumbed it on, directing its weak, wavering beam towards the source of the sound. Nothing, only the pale, taut nylon, empty and inert. He drew a ragged breath, attempting to quell the tremor in his limbs, and then it returned, louder this time, a definite pressure against the thin wall, testing its give. Ice traced its way down his spine. He had to look. The not knowing was intolerable. Steeling himself, heart pounding a frantic rhythm, he eased the zipper down just enough to create a narrow slit. The flashlight beam, quivering violently, sliced through the night air as he peered out, scanning the immediate vicinity. Empty. Only the familiar silhouettes of trees, the deeper shadows beneath them, the glint of starlight on the distant stream. He lingered there, head poking cautiously from the tent, straining his ears against the silence, waiting. But the forest offered no further disturbance. Just nerves, he tried to persuade himself, an overactive mind in an unfamiliar place. With profound reluctance, he retreated fully into the tent, sealing the opening, and huddled back into the sleeping bag, though the pretense of sleep was now utterly abandoned. Then, a new sound began, insidious and chilling, so faint it was almost imagined, yet undeniably present, a sibilant whispering, seeming to emanate from the very air outside the tent. He couldn't discern words, couldn't be certain it was even human, perhaps just the wind teasing the leaves in a peculiar way. But the sound resonated deep within him, raising gooseflesh, tightening his scalp. He lay paralyzed, listening intently, arguing frantically with his own perception. Yet, the longer it persisted, the more convinced he became. It was a voice. Low, susurrant, uttering incomprehensible murmurs just beyond the canvas. His hand, slick with sweat, found the flashlight once more. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, he unzipped the tent again, thrusting the beam into the night. The whispering ceased instantly. The ensuing silence pressed in, heavier and more menacing than the sound itself. Frantically, he swept the light across the campsite, the empty fire pit, the stoic trees, the impenetrable darkness beyond. Nothing, absolutely nothing. He yanked the zipper closed, the teeth grating loudly in the stillness, and sat rigid in the blackness, clutching the flashlight like a talisman, its beam extinguished to conserve power, yet unwilling to relinquish its potential defense. Should he flee, burst out into the night and run? The thought of abandoning the tent's flimsy protection for the vast, unseen darkness was paralyzing. So he waited, huddled and vigilant, praying for the dawn, listening to the crushing silence, acutely aware of his solitude, or perhaps the horrifying lack of it. Gray light eventually seeped through the fabric, tentative at first, then strengthening into the undeniable clarity of morning. Sunlight slanted through the trees, illuminating a scene utterly mundane, tranquil, scrubbed clean of nocturnal terrors. A shaky sigh escaped Elias, relief washing over him in a dizzying wave. Whatever presence had haunted the night, it had vanished with the darkness. Without pause, he began dismantling his camp, movements swift, almost frantic, driven by an urgent need to be gone. He stuffed gear haphazardly into his pack, casting frequent, nervous glances over his shoulder, half expecting to see a figure emerge from the tree line. But the forest remained empty, offering only the familiar chorus of birdsong and the rustle of wind-stirred leaves. Reaching his car felt like crossing a finish line. He threw his pack into the back, slid behind the wheel, the familiar scent of the vehicle a small comfort. The engine turning over was the sweetest sound he'd heard in hours. As he navigated the rough track back towards civilization, away from the isolated clearing and the whispering stream, the oppressive weight lessened, but did not disappear entirely. A persistent sense of being observed clung to him, an unseen gaze following from the depths of the woods he left behind. And sometimes, in the quiet moments before sleep, or when the wind sighs just so, he hears it again, that faint, sibilant murmur, an indelible echo in the chambers of his memory, a chilling reminder of the night the woods spoke back. It began the first night, the echo tread. I recall leaning against the balcony's ancient timber railing, the wood smooth and weathered beneath my palm, seeking refuge in the night air after the long haul of arrival. A soft groan emanated from the floorboards as I shifted my weight. Then another, identical, delayed, a spectral mimicry of my own movement. Wind, perhaps? Loose joinery settling into place? So I reasoned, dismissing the prickle of unease crawling up my spine, even as the cadence felt unnervingly deliberate. Solitude defines my existence in this house. Not vast in square footage, it borrows immensity from the sprawling yard and the sentinel trees guarding its perimeter. The balcony surveys this backyard expanse. By day, tranquility reigns. Sunlight filters through leafy canopies. Birdsong drifts on the breeze. But nightfall transfigures the scene. The woods bleed into an inkwell darkness deeper than any I've known. Leaves rustle with amplified urgency, and the balcony's old planks seem to sigh underfoot, precarious and frail. My second night, armed with a notion, foolish perhaps, that nocturnal familiarity might breed acceptance, I ventured out again near midnight. A torch beam sliced the gloom. One step onto the planks, normal. A second, equally unremarkable. I paused then, breath held captive in my chest, listening for the phantom footfall. My heart hammered against my ribs. The torch quivered in my grasp. Seconds stretched into an eternity before a faint strain of wood sounded beneath my left foot. I'd barely shifted. Nothing, I told myself. Yet behind me, it came again, the distinct compression of timber, as if another adjusted their stance. I whirled, the torchlight cutting frantic arcs. Emptiness greeted me. Only my solitary form cast long, dancing shadows. Sweat beaded on my skin despite the cool air. A knot tightened in my gut, my breathing shallow and rapid. Kneeling, I scanned the floorboards, hunting for a loose culprit, stepping experimentally here, then there. Sometimes a creak, sometimes silence. No discernible pattern emerged, yet the conviction of unseen company refused to dissipate. Resting my elbows on the railing, I peered into the shadowed yard. Bushes rustled near the tree line, indistinct shapes shifting just beyond the torch's reach. After several minutes steeped in this charged stillness, I retreated indoors, the click of the lock echoing unnervingly loud. The subsequent days were a flurry of mundane activity, unpacking, arranging furniture, forging the semblance of routine. Daylight banished the phantoms. The balcony, bathed in sun, felt benign. I stepped onto it tentatively a few times. The wood groaned predictably, singly. No echo tread followed. I nearly surrendered to the comforting explanation that my fatigue had conjured the sounds. Then, a week hence, beneath the luminous gaze of a full moon, I stepped out again. My intention was brief: secure a rattling shutter, maybe steal a moment with the lunar glow. The instant my foot met the first plank, it protested. Immediately, a second sharp creak sounded just behind me. My pulse leaped. I froze. Moonlight silvered the entire structure, rendering the familiar alien. My eyes swept the space. Railing, door, vacant air. They snagged on a patch in the far corner, wood stained darker than the rest. A susurrus arose, faint as moth wings. 2, maybe 3 voices, low and conspiratorial. Words remained elusive, yet the feeling of eavesdropping on urgent secret discourse was palpable. I stood stock still, breath trapped. The murmuring faded, then swelled again. The fine hairs on my arms lifted. My mouth turned to dust. I wedged the balcony door open with my foot, a desperate anchor to sanctuary. One part of me screamed to flee, another remained rooted, paralyzed by a chilling certainty. Something stood beside me, sharing my vigil, gazing out at the darkened yard. My shoulder blade tingled, anticipating a touch that never came. Perhaps 10 seconds crawled by before silence reclaimed the night. Drawing a ragged breath, I backed slowly, deliberately, into the house. Inside, safety felt illusory. The door slammed shut, the lock turned with trembling fingers. My legs gave way, depositing me onto the living room sofa. Logic warred with instinct. Old houses settle, winds carry stray sounds. Yet, the visceral certainty of presence lingered. The television flickered to life, a bulwark against the silence. But sleep remained elusive for hours, my gaze repeatedly drawn to the back door. For several nights, the balcony remained forbidden territory. Curtains stayed drawn, that wing of the house shunned after twilight. But curiosity, insidious and persistent, gnawed at the edges of my fear. Understanding became a compulsion. On the fourth night of this self-imposed exile, I resolved to test the phenomenon again. 2 a.m. The world outside lay hushed, amplifying every nuance. Hand on the doorknob, I hesitated, palms slick with sweat, heart a leaden weight in my chest. The door swung inward. I stepped across the threshold. The wood groaned. Instantly, the second groan answered, fractionally out of sync, unnervingly close, as if someone paced just behind my shoulder. I spun, faster this time. Nothing but moon-washed planks. Fumbling, I unclipped the torch from my belt, its beam sweeping the floor, probing each corner. Empty. Swallowing hard against the dryness in my throat, I advanced a few paces. A board squeaked ahead, and again, the immediate echo. My skin crawled. A faint scent reached me, elusive. Old wood, damp earth, decay. A soft clink, delicate as glass tapping wood, sounded from the balcony's far end. My torch beam snapped towards the noise. Only the railing met my gaze, and a small weathered table I hadn't yet moved. The surface was bare. No glass, no object that could produce such a sound. Yet, it came again. Clink. Breath hitched in my throat. My grip tightened on the torch until my knuckles ached. Sweat traced a cold path down my temple. In the ensuing silence, a brief, muted shuffling, like stockinged feet shifting on wood. Two people, perhaps, moving carefully around each other. My eyes darted wildly, seeking a source, finding none. Tension coiled in my neck and shoulders, turning muscle to stone. Then, absolute quiet descended, broken only by the ragged rhythm of my own breathing. Before thought could form, the whispers returned, intimate now, seeming to brush against my very ear. The torch slipped from my nerveless fingers, clattering onto the boards, rolling away into shadow. The whispers dissolved into a low, resonant hum. A chill breeze, born of no discernible wind, stirred the air around me. Tears of sheer stress pricked my eyes. I gripped the railing, knuckles white, staring into the impenetrable darkness of the yard, waiting for revelation, for some form to coalesce from the shadows. My mind raced, conjuring silhouettes, phantom shapes drifting towards me. But the yard remained stubbornly empty, save for the gentle sway of unseen branches. After a minute, maybe two, that felt like an age, I slowly crouched, fumbling for the fallen torch. My hands shook so violently it took several attempts to grasp it. I switched it off. The light felt like a provocation, not a comfort. Escape was the only imperative. I scrambled back inside, slamming the door, ramming the bolt home. My breathing came in shuddering gasps. My shirt clung, damp with cold sweat. Sleep was a forgotten country that night. Morning invariably brought a fragile peace. The balcony, under the scrutiny of daylight, resumed its guise of benign woodwork. The timber felt solid, the air crisp. Stepping onto it yielded nothing more than the expected creaks of an old structure. No spectral footsteps, no disembodied voices, just wood and air and sunlight. But with the fall of night, it underwent a metamorphosis, becoming something other, alive, haunted. The distinction blurred. Driven by a need for answers, I sifted through the house's legacy papers. Maintenance records surfaced, receipts for roofing repairs, a previous owner's note mentioning the balcony's eventual need for replacement. Nothing hinted at unsettling occurrences, no whispers of unexplained sounds. I crawled beneath the structure, torch in hand, searching for structural anomalies, some trick of acoustics born from damage. Only support beams draped in cobwebs met my inspection. Night after night, the second tread persisted, a faithful shadow to my own movements whenever I dared step outside, sometimes sharp and distinct, other times a mere suggestion, an extra squeak, a soft shuffle just beyond hearing's edge. Moon-drenched nights remained the most potent. Then, the whispers would rise, distant yet intimate, like secrets exchanged in hushed urgency, weaving plots I couldn't decipher but whose clandestine energy prickled my skin. Anxiety became my daytime companion, a creaking floorboard inside, the sigh of settling foundations. Each innocent sound sent my heart racing, bracing for the familiar, unwelcome echo. One evening, desperation birthed a new strategy. I carried a chair onto the balcony before sunset, positioning myself as an observer, hoping to witness the transition from dusk to the domain of the unseen. Around 6, the sun bled behind the trees, the air cooling. I sat, sipping water, gaze fixed on the deepening woods. For a long while, only the sounds of twilight accompanied me. But as indigo stained the sky, tension began its insidious creep. The wood beneath the chair legs groaned once. A beat later, its phantom twin answered. My hands clenched the armrests, pulse quickening. A true breeze stirred the leaves overhead, yet the atmosphere felt suddenly heavier, charged. I waited, scarcely breathing, straining for footfall or murmur. Gooseflesh pebbled my arms against the growing chill. An hour or so after true dark had fallen, the first whisper breathed into the stillness, faint as if spoken from across the space, though the balcony remained solely mine. I surged to my feet, the chair scraping harshly against the planks. Instantly, a delayed scrape mirrored my action. The sound of unseen furniture dragged across wood. Nausea churned. My hand reached for the doorknob, then paused. A defiant spark, a need to see. "Hello?" The word emerged thin and shaky, betraying a desperation I despised. Silence answered, absolute. Then, behind me, the floorboards creaked. 1 step, 2. A distinct warmth bloomed on the back of my neck, the unmistakable proximity of another being, standing inches away. My breath caught. I spun around, finding only vacant space, the familiar railing stark against the night. Turning back, my eyes fixed on the door handle. It rattled. A single sharp vibration, then stillness. My mind emptied, leaving only a primal command. Inside. I stumbled through the doorway, slammed it shut, twisted the lock, and collapsed onto the sofa, yanking the curtains closed with violent finality. The sensation of presence lingered, a phantom limb attached to my awareness, refusing to remain outside. My neck and shoulders throbbed with residual tension. Now, dusk signals retreat. The balcony is forbidden ground once the sun descends. Curtains remain drawn, shields against the night. Every lamp blazes, pushing back the shadows. Books and screens offer distraction, fragile barriers against the sounds that sometimes bleed through. Creaks emanate from the forbidden space, slow, measured footsteps pacing the boards, though I remain resolutely indoors. Once, the low murmuring persisted for nearly 30 minutes, a constant, unnerving thrum against the silence. I sat frozen in the living room, staring at the door, heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs, until finally, it ceased. Recording it feels like courting madness, capturing proof I fear I couldn't bear to confront. Is there a mundane root to this terror? Structural quirks warping sound. The neighbors' distant voices carried on peculiar currents. Logic offers these possibilities, thin comforts easily shredded by the dead of night. When the echo tread sounds, when that chilling proximity manifests beside me, reason evaporates. A vice tightens around my chest, and all existence narrows to a single desire, the return of dawn. I tell myself I will unravel this mystery, find the source. But deep down, certainty wavers. All I truly know is that when darkness claims the house, the balcony transforms. It ceases to be mere wood and nails. It becomes something else entirely, a place I can no longer inhabit alone. A caustic perfume, essence of scorched rubber, stung the air as plumes of smoke unfurled from beneath my car's bonnet. Momentum bled away, the vehicle sighing to a halt on the frayed edge of a forsaken country lane. My optimism plummeted with the dying coughs of the engine. Sundown bled across the sky, a spectacular wash of fierce orange and arterial red, yet its grandeur was lost on me. Here I was, adrift in a sea of whispering wheat, cellular signal non-existent, leagues from any semblance of civilization. With a surge of futile hope, I wrestled the bonnet open. Steam hissed a venomous greeting. Before me lay an intricate, baffling geography of metal and wire, a territory utterly alien. Mechanical aptitude evaded me. Tools were a laughable fantasy. I slammed the bonnet closed, a percussive punctuation to my frustration, and leaned heavily against the cooling metal, scanning the panorama. Immense fields undulated under the caress of the twilight breeze. Far off, almost an illusion, stood a farmhouse, a solitary pinprick of light gleaming in a window, my sole beacon. Should I hazard the walk or gamble on the charity of a phantom motorist? The decision hung heavy when a low growl vibrated through the dusk. An approaching engine. Relief, potent and sudden, washed through me. An old battered pickup truck materialized, decelerating beside my inert car. The driver, a man whose face bore the intricate map of years, lived outdoors, possessed eyes that held an unexpected gentleness. He lowered his window. "Bit of bother?" His voice, resonant yet amiable, broke the stillness. Gratitude surged. I nodded. "Yes," completely gave up on me. "You wouldn't happen to be skilled with engines, would you?" A soft chuckle escaped him. "Afraid that's not my line, miss. Happy to give you a lift into Havenwood, though. Jedediah there runs the garage, knows his way around most anything." A flicker of caution. Every cautionary tale whispered against accepting rides from strangers, particularly in such profound isolation. But the last vestiges of daylight were dissolving, swallowed by the horizon. My options felt perilously thin. "That would be wonderful, thank you," I managed, striving to banish the trepidation from my tone. He offered a reassuring smile, leaning across the cab to push open the passenger door. "Climb aboard. Name Silas." "Eliza," I offered, settling onto the bench seat. The cab's atmosphere was a curious blend of stale tobacco and pine-scented cardboard, oddly comforting. Silas engaged the gears, and the truck rumbled back onto the asphalt ribbon. My hand hovered near the door latch, a silent promise of escape. Yet, as we journeyed, Silas wove a tapestry of affable discourse, tales of his acreage, his grandchildren's impending visit, a self-deprecating anecdote about his own long-ago breakdown and nocturnal trek home. Against my better judgment, the tension coiled within me began to slacken. I even found myself smiling at his homespun humor. But a disquieting awareness began to dawn. We'd been traveling for what felt like an age, certainly over half an hour, yet no signposts for Havenwood, no inkling of approaching settlement had appeared. The open fields had surrendered to dense looming woods. The road had narrowed, twisting like a serpent through the encroaching trees. Silas, I ventured, a quaver threatening the word. Are we certain this is the route to town? He cast a sideways glance, his expression opaque in the faint glow of the dashboard lights. Oh, don't you fret. Just taking a bit of a scenic shortcut. Shaves off some time. Internal alarms shrieked. Fragments of true crime narratives flooded my mind. The trusting women, the charming strangers, the disappearances into thin air. Actually, I stated, my throat constricting, I think I'd rather return to my car. I can just wait there for a recovery service. Silas's grip on the steering wheel visibly tightened, his knuckles blanching. Now, he crooned, the geniality evaporating from his voice like morning mist. No need for agitation. We're nearly there. My heart hammered against my ribs. Adrenaline surged, hot and sharp. I lunged for the door handle, poised to tumble out, regardless of the truck's velocity. The instant my fingers brushed the cold metal, Silas slammed on the brakes. The truck fishtailed violently, pitching me forward against the seatbelt's brutal restraint. Before I could draw breath, his arm shot across, thumbing the lock down with a definitive click. Apologies for this, he murmured, his tone unnervingly placid. But I can't have you leaving, not just yet. Panic seized me, raw and overwhelming. I scrabbled at the door, desperate for the unlock switch, but Silas captured my wrists in a grip like forged iron. Stop struggling, he snarled. It only makes things more difficult. A scream tore from my throat, swallowed instantly by the vast, indifferent forest surrounding us. Miles from anywhere, encased in darkness and silence. Silas restarted the engine, guiding the truck deeper into the arboreal maze. I sat paralyzed by terror, my thoughts a chaotic whirlwind of horrific outcomes. After an eternity compressed into mere minutes, we lurched to a stop before a small, isolated cabin. The headlights painted a scene of decay, a dilapidated porch, timbers succumbing to rot, paint peeling like sunburnt skin. Silas disembarked, circling to my side. He wrenched the door open, seizing my arm and hauling me out. Resistance was futile against his brute strength. Please, I sobbed, tears coursing freely. Please don't. Let me go. I won't tell a soul, I promise. He dragged me onward, deaf to my pleas. As the cabin loomed closer, a sound reached me that turned my blood to ice. The murmur of voices from within, not just one, several. He shoved the door inward, propelling me forward. I stumbled, landing hard on the dusty floorboards. Lifting my head, blinking through tears, my gaze swept the room, widening first in shock, then dawning horror. The space teemed with people, men, women, a few wide-eyed children, huddled together, their faces mirroring the terror that gripped me. And dominating the center of the room stood a figure instantly recognizable from countless news bulletins. The charismatic leader of an apocalyptic sect, vanished without trace months prior. Welcome, the leader intoned, his voice a silken menace. We have been expecting you. Silas moved to stand beside him. I brought another, as requested. My gaze darted around the room, my mind struggling to assimilate the grotesque reality. These weren't Silas's confederates. They were his harvest, ensnared just as I was. The leader began to speak, expounding his warped dogma about imminent cataclysm and their status as the chosen few destined for salvation. His words washed over me, unheard. My focus narrowed, scanning frantically for any sliver of hope, any potential egress. Then I saw it, a small window tucked away near the cabin's rear, partially obscured by stacked crates. Small, perhaps, but potentially passable. While the leader pontificated and Silas stood rapt, I began a slow, painstaking crawl towards it. The eyes of the other captives followed my furtive movements, wide with a dangerous cocktail of fear and nascent hope. Reaching the window, my fingers fumbled with the latch. Rusted solid, it wouldn't yield. A desperate glance back, the leader and Silas remained engrossed in their unholy peroration, oblivious. Summoning a final reserve of adrenaline-fueled strength, I threw my weight against the frame. With a tortured screech of protesting wood, the window gave way. The sound echoed, silencing the room. "Stop her!" the leader roared. Too late. I was already scrambling through the opening, tumbling onto the damp earth outside. I clambered to my feet and plunged blindly into the black embrace of the forest. Branches lashed my face, unseen roots threatened to trip me, but I didn't falter. Shouts and the crashing sounds of pursuit erupted behind me. Onward I ran, lungs searing, legs screaming, propelled solely by primal fear. How long I ran, I cannot say. Minutes blurred into an age. Gradually, the sounds of pursuit receded, replaced by the nocturnal symphony of the woods. I slowed, my breath escaping in ragged staccato bursts. Lost, disoriented, directionless, yet knowing stillness was not an option. As the first faint brushstrokes of dawn diluted the darkness, a sound reached me, beautiful, improbable, life-affirming, the distant thrum of highway traffic. I stumbled towards it, eventually collapsing onto the shoulder of a main road. A passing lorry driver spotted me, braked, his face a mask of concern, and immediately called the authorities. Huddled in the warmth of his cab, awaiting the flashing lights, the enormity of the night crashed down upon me. I dissolved into racking, uncontrollable sobs. In the ensuing days, relaying my ordeal to uniformed officers, piecing together the fragments of trauma, the full narrative emerged. Silas, the kindly stranger, had been systematically harvesting the vulnerable for the cult, preying on breakdowns and isolation. The cabin was raided, the other captives liberated, Silas and the charismatic leader apprehended. Escape was my fortune, but the ordeal irrevocably reshaped me. Vigilance became my default setting, suspicion a constant companion shadowing every seemingly benign encounter. Yet, paradoxically, the terror had unearthed a resilience within me, a strength I hadn't known I possessed until survival demanded it. Now, the sight of a stranded vehicle triggers an internal conflict, the ingrained impulse to assist warring with the chilling memory of that night. I make the call. Police, roadside assistance, offering aid from a necessary distance. Driving past is not an option, but neither is repeating the mistake. For I learned in the crucible of fear that the hand extended in help can sometimes belong to the most profound danger. Weeks of mounting pressure had worn Ilara thin, a frayed nerve ending in the city's relentless thrum. Work piled like drifts of gray snow, inescapable. An escape wasn't just desired, it was a primal need, a yearning for the crushing weight to lift. She found refuge in memory, a cabin, secluded, nestled beside Miramir, an hour's drive from the nearest whisper of civilization. She'd known its solace before: timber walls, a view across water, an absence of connection save for the wind in the pines, absolute quiet. The car chewed up the miles, asphalt surrendering to gravel, then dirt. Arrival coincided with the sun's slow bleed into the horizon. There it stood, precisely as etched in her mind. Humble wood, a small porch gazing over the lake's darkening glass. A lockbox beside the door yielded the key. Luggage dragged inside, she crossed the threshold into another state of being. Pine resin and the ghost of wood smoke filled the air, underscored by the gentle sigh of water against the shore, the rustle of unseen leaves. Unpacking was a swift ritual. Jacket donned, she stepped back onto the porch, drinking in the view before night claimed it fully. A knot deep within her began to unravel. This silence, this space, it was the antidote. She lingered on the porch, letting the woodland symphony wash over her. The chirps, the clicks, the breath of the breeze. The sun sank lower, painting long skeletal shadows across the water. A silent promise formed. Witness the dawn. As true dark enveloped the cabin, she retreated inside, the heavy thud of the lock echoing slightly. A fire crackled to life in the hearth, casting flickering amber light on the rough-hewn walls. Tea brewed, book in hand, she settled into the embrace of the armchair. Peace felt tangible, a warm blanket. She read until drowsiness claimed her, the forest's nocturnal murmurings a lullaby. The first night passed undisturbed. Morning broke spectacular and clear. Coffee steamed in her mug as she sat on the porch, watching dawn paint Miramir in strokes of rose and gold. The water, utterly still, offered a perfect inverted world. A feeling bloomed. She could dissolve into this tranquility forever. The day unfolded in aimless wandering, tracing trails that skirted the lake, breathing air that tasted clean and sharp. By evening, a pleasant weariness settled in her bones. A simple meal, a chapter read by the dying fire, then an early surrender to sleep. It was the second night when the stillness fractured. Drifting on the edge of sleep, a sound pricked her awareness. Faint, almost apologetic, the skittering crunch of leaves underfoot. Someone or something was near the cabin. Her eyes flew open, body rigid, listening, heart hammered against ribs. Silence returned, thick and absolute. An animal, surely, a deer perhaps, or a curious raccoon. She squeezed her eyes shut, willing the rational thought to take root. But then it returned, a slow, measured tread circling the perimeter. She slid from the bed, muscles coiled. The footsteps paused, then resumed, moving with unnerving deliberation around the cabin's far side. Barefoot, silent, she crept to the window, peering into the ink-washed darkness. Nothing but the familiar shapes of trees, deeper patches of shadow. Her fingers twitched towards her phone, a useless reflex. No bars, no lifeline. A shaky breath. Just an animal. The mantra felt thin. Retreating to bed, she pulled the blankets high, a flimsy shield against the unseen. Eventually, the sounds ceased, leaving a silence that felt heavier, less benign than before. Morning light brought a hesitant inspection. Elara circled the cabin, scanning the damp earth, the carpet of fallen leaves. Nothing. No prints, no disturbed foliage, no sign whatsoever. A flush of foolishness warmed her cheeks. Had exhaustion conjured phantoms? A dream bleeding into waking? She forced the unease down, determined to reclaim the day. to trust the peace she'd sought. But that night, the fear returned, sharp and undeniable. She lay awake, feigning sleep, when the footsteps began anew. Louder this time, closer, imbued with a chilling certainty. Upright in bed, heart a frantic drum, she listened. The pace was methodical, unhurried, as if inventorying the cabin's exterior. Trembling, she rose and stole to the window, and saw it. A flicker of movement against the moon-dappled trees, a silhouette, tall and starkly upright, gliding just beyond the pool of light spilling from the window. Humanoid, yet devoid of detail, a presence carved from shadow, moving with that same slow, purposeful rhythm. Ice flooded her veins. She stood frozen, watching, the frantic pulse in her ears drowning out the forest sounds. The shape drifted around the cabin, pausing near the front door. No face visible, yet she felt a gaze upon her, heavy and appraising. It knew she was there. She backed away from the glass, mind racing, trapped. The useless phone, the miles of empty woods, the utter isolation. From her bag, she retrieved a sturdy flashlight, its cold metal a small comfort, clutching it like a club. She retreated to the darkest corner of the room, sank to the floor, and waited, listening. An eternity seemed to pass before the footsteps finally receded, fading back into the night. Sleep was impossible. She spent the remaining hours huddled in the dark, eyes darting towards the windows, expecting the shadow's return. Daylight felt harsh, exposing her raw nerves. Every snap of a twig, every bird call sent a jolt through her. She ventured outside, compelled to search again, though she knew what she wouldn't find. Nothing. No tracks, no tangible proof. Yet the image of the shadow was burned into her mind, the certainty of its presence absolute. That night, sleep was not even attempted. Ilara sat in the main room, every lamp blazing, the flashlight resting heavy in her lap. She fought a rising tide of self-doubt, paranoia, imagination running wild. Then, near midnight, the sound began. The footsteps, now possessing an unnerving weight, a solid confidence. The circuit began again, slower this time. The figure paused at each window pane. A soft tap, tap, tap against the glass. Gentle, almost tentative, like a polite inquiry. Nausea churned within her. Her grip tightened on the flashlight. She remained utterly still, scarcely breathing. The tapping migrated, window to window, patient, relentless. It seemed to have all the time in the world. Then, silence fell once more, a suffocating blanket. Ilara waited, every nerve stretched taut. From directly outside the front door, a sound slipped through the wood, low and sibilant. A whisper. "Let me in." Her blood turned to ice water, motionless, breathless. The whisper breathed again, closer, insistent, seeming to curl around the edges of the doorframe. "Let me in." She scrambled backward, hands shaking violently, tucking herself behind the bulky sofa, trying to shrink, to disappear. The whisper rose, gaining an edge of demand. "Let me in." Something inside her snapped. Pure, instinctual flight. She lunged for the back door, fumbling with the lock, wrenching it open, and plunged into the blackness. No thought, no backward glance. Branches clawed at her face and arms as she crashed through the undergrowth, lungs screaming for air. Directionless, driven only by the desperate need for distance. After an age, she stumbled onto the rough surface of a dirt track. She followed it, legs leaden, chest burning, until twin beams cut through the darkness. Headlights. She threw her arms up, a wild, frantic signal. A vehicle slowed, a window rolled down, a concerned face peered out. Words tumbled out of her, choked and incoherent. Help. Someone chasing her. The driver, blessedly unquestioning, unlocked the passenger door. He drove her towards the distant lights of a town, towards the sterile comfort of a police station. They returned to the cabin, officers armed and skeptical. They found nothing. No footprints near the doors or windows, no signs of an attempted break-in. An animal, they suggested gently. A bear, perhaps, common in these woods. The voice. Panic does strange things to the mind, they explained. But Elara knew. She knew the cold weight of that presence, the chilling intimacy of that whisper. And in the quiet solitude of nights ever since, safe behind locked doors in the heart of the city, she still hears it, an echo in the deepest hollows of her memory. Let me in. Something occupied the driver's seat, a silhouette, stark against the interior gloom of my aging sedan. 20 feet shy of the car, parked in the echoing expanse of the mall lot at 11:47 p.m. I froze, the asphalt suddenly a precipice. The overhead sodium lamps bled a sickly yellow, just enough to confirm the presence. A head distinct above the rest, shoulders slumped forward in unnerving stillness. My keys bit sharply into my palm, a small metallic pain grounding me against the frantic pulse hammering my ribs. A reflex blink, a desperate clearing of vision, and then nothing. Just the worn upholstery of my driver's seat, empty under the dome light I hadn't yet activated. Time stretched, elastic and uncertain. Minutes might have passed as I stood rooted, staring, while a cold sweat mapped my spine despite the crisp October bite in the air. The parking lot yawned around me, a desolate landscape punctuated by a few distant vehicles huddled near the 24-hour fitness center. Silence pressed in, thick and absolute, broken only by the low hum of the towering lamps and the ragged, shallow tempo of my own breathing. Coherence returned slowly, coalescing around a single thought. Call the authorities. My hand trembled as it retrieved my phone, but my thumb hovered, paralyzed, over the glowing emergency icon. What report could I possibly file? Phantom occupant. Vanished on blink. They'd dispatch a sobriety test, not a squad car. Tentative steps carried me closer, my eyes sweeping the perimeter of the sedan, probing the pools of shadow beneath it, the spaces between distant cars. Stillness reigned, no crouching figures, no furtive movements. The windows were intact, gleaming dully. I thumbed the unlock button on the fob. The car chirped, lights flashing obedience. No alarm had shrieked its violation. Is anyone there? My voice, thin and reedy, was swallowed instantly by the vast emptiness. Silence answered. I circled the vehicle, a slow, apprehensive orbit. Through the glass, the cabin appeared undisturbed. No jimmy marks scarred the door frames. No shattered glass glittered on the asphalt. My satchel rested on the back seat, precisely where I'd tossed it hours before. Nothing out of place. It had to be hallucination, exhaustion from the late nights, the relentless project deadlines, caffeine overload, a mind pushed too far, fabricating specters from fatigue. That was the only rational explanation. Yet, reaching for the driver's door handle, my fingers quivered. A pause, a breath held tight, then I wrenched it open, instinctively recoiling. The interior light flickered on, illuminating emptiness. I leaned in, a cautious reconnaissance of the back seat, the floor wells. vacant. But the air inside was wrong. An alien scent coiled beneath the familiar notes of stale coffee and old vinyl, something earthy, chthonic, the smell of disturbed graves or deep woods after a drenching rain. My nose wrinkled. Had I tracked mud in earlier? A crawl of unease traced its way up my neck as I slid behind the wheel. The seat radiated a chill that defied the ambient air, a cold that felt absorbed, intrinsic. I turned the key. The engine grumbled to life without protest. The radio resumed its drone of familiar classic rock, all systems nominal. "You're cracking up, Elias," I murmured, adjusting the rearview mirror, seeking normalcy in the mundane act. "Seriously, dial back the stimulants." Then, remembrance. The security cameras. Ubiquitous eyes mounted on poles throughout the lot. Silent witnesses I'd noted during previous late-night departures. If someone had been inside, their presence would be recorded. For a moment, engine idling, I wrestled with the urge to just drive, to flee this unsettling ambiguity and seek the forgetfulness of home. But the gnawing uncertainty wouldn't allow it. Sleep would be impossible, haunted by the what-if. Engine off, doors locked. The walk toward the mall's darkened bulk, specifically toward a side entrance near the loading docks frequented by security, felt impossibly long. Every shadow seemed to writhe in my periphery. The slap of my own footsteps echoed unnaturally against the concrete facade. Glances thrown backward confirmed my sedan sat inert, ordinary beneath the jaundiced lights. I pressed the intercom beside the steel door. A long beat of silence, then a disembodied voice, weary, crackled through the speaker. "Yeah? Apologies for the late hour. I work upstairs. I think someone might have attempted entry into my vehicle. Is there any way to review the security feed?" Another pause. "Got your ID?" I presented my building access card to the small camera lens above the panel. Seconds later, a sharp buzz, the click of a magnetic lock releasing. The security hub was a small, sterile room bathed in the cool luminescence of multiple monitors. A guard, Sal, a man thick-set and settled into late middle age, glanced up from his phone. "Car location?" he asked, thumbing the phone screen dark. I pointed out the zone on a displayed map. He navigated through camera feeds, grainy monochrome images flickering across the main screen. "Time?" "Just now. 15 minutes ago, maybe. Walking out, I saw someone inside." He nodded, manipulating the timeline, spooling the footage backward. My own figure appeared, crossing the lot, then stopping abruptly, staring intently at the sedan. The angle wasn't ideal, but my posture of frozen attention was unmistakable. "Don't see nobody else," Sal observed, leaning closer, squinting. "Could you rewind further? They must have gotten in before I came out." He complied. The digital clock spun backward. Cars materialized and vanished in reverse. He stopped the playback roughly an hour prior to my exit. We watched in real time. My sedan sat, isolated and untouched. No one approached. Until 11:12 p.m., a distortion rippled across the tarmac near my vehicle. Less a figure, more a mobile void, roughly human-shaped but lacking definition. It didn't approach the sedan so much as flow towards it, its edges blurring, fraying, like smoke or heat haze in the low-resolution feed. Reaching the vehicle, it didn't open a door. It simply diffused into the car's outline, absorbed without a seam, leaving the sedan's shape subtly darker for a moment before returning to normal. "The hell is that?" Sal muttered, rewinding, replaying. The sequence repeated, the amorphous shadow gliding, becoming indistinct, melting into the car. Other angles? My voice was dry, raspy. He switched feeds. Different perspectives confirmed the same bizarre event. A smudge of darkness detaching itself from the deeper night, drifting, losing cohesion as it neared my car, then vanishing into it. Crucially, no footage showed anything emerging afterward. System glitch, Sal declared, though his tone lacked conviction. Get weird artifacts sometimes. Night vision, infrared, plays tricks. Right, I managed weakly. A glitch. He offered an escort back to the car. I declined, unwilling to let him witness the tremor in my hands. The return journey across the asphalt felt weighted, each step requiring conscious effort. Part of me screamed to abandon the car, summon a rideshare, sever the connection. But practicality, the need for transport tomorrow, won out. I couldn't just leave it. Drawing near, I saw it. Peculiar, feathery patterns blooming across the driver's side window like frost despite the mild 50-degree air. Unlocking the door released that scent again, stronger now, underpinned by a faint coppery tang. The smell of old pennies held too long in a sweaty palm. The seat remained frigid, radiating a palpable coldness. My phone buzzed violently in my pocket, making me jump. A text from my wife. Okay, later than usual. Working late, I typed back, fingers clumsy. On my way. Delay was no longer an option. A deep inhalation, steeling myself, and I slid into the driver's seat. The cold seeped through my clothes, invasive. Engine on, heater blasting. I reversed, pulling away from the spot that now felt profoundly tainted. The drive home was a taut wire of anxiety. My gaze flicked constantly to the rear view, hunting shadows in the empty back seat, though what I truly expected to see remained horrifyingly vague. That loamy, metallic odor persisted, clinging despite the wind tearing through open windows and the heat pouring from the vents. The car itself seemed unwell. The radio sputtered between static and song. Overhead, the dome light pulsed erratically, a failing heartbeat. The temperature needle swung with manic energy between H and C, disconnected from the steady warmth output. Halfway home, a glance back, a sudden, heart-stopping impression of deeper darkness coalescing on the rear bench, a shape denser than the surrounding night. I instinctively jerked the wheel, the car momentarily fishtailing before I wrestled it back into the lane. When my terrified eyes darted to the mirror again, the back seat was empty, but the mirror's surface had bloomed instantly opaque with interior frost, blinding me to whatever might or might not be behind me. I reached my driveway in what felt like impossibly fast time, likely shredding speed limits. Engine silenced, I sat enveloped in the sudden quiet, the garage door opener dangling from the visor, unused. Habit dictated parking inside, secure. Tonight, however, a primal resistance flared, an instinct warning against enclosing this vehicle, this presence, within the intimate confines of my home. Inside, my wife slept soundly. Claiming a headache, I bypassed conversation and went straight to bed, though sleep remained elusive. Hours passed in the darkness, listening to the house breathe, every creak and settling groan amplified, my mind replaying the parking lot tableau, the impossible footage. Morning, I called in sick. Once my wife departed for her office, I confronted the car in the revealing light of day. Outwardly, normalcy seemed restored, but opening the door released the familiar, unwelcome miasma, now richer with distinct undertones of decay layered beneath the damp earth smell. The driver's seat remained cold to the touch, defying the hours spent basking in the morning sun, and the frost patterns, intricate and unsettling, still adorned every window, impervious to the warmth. Closer inspection revealed the chilling truth. The frost was on the inside of the glass. That same morning, I drove to the nearest dealership and traded the sedan, accepting a financial loss that felt like a bargain for severance. It should have ended there. New car, slate wiped clean. But the phenomena merely transferred hosts. Small disturbances at first, easily dismissed. Then patterns emerged. Security cameras at the office would dissolve into pixelated noise as I passed, the recorded footage showing that same indistinct smudge trailing me. Electronics developed eccentricities in my vicinity. Phone batteries draining with alarming speed, lights stuttering upon my entry into a room, the television screen erupting into frantic static when I settled nearby. My new vehicle, inevitably, began exhibiting the same symptoms. The unnatural cold spots localized on the driver's side, the phantom scent creeping back into the cabin, the crystalline patterns blooming inward on the glass during cool nights. And sometimes, hovering at the very edge of my sight, a flicker, a darkness trailing just beyond focus, always vanishing when I turned to confront it, yet its presence a constant chilling weight. The other night, another late departure from the office, another walk through the concrete wasteland toward my car, and there it was, occupying the driver's seat of my new car. This time, I didn't freeze. I didn't blink. I simply stood and watched as the head, a concentration of shadow within the cabin's gloom, swiveled slowly toward me. No features were discernible, nothing remotely human, yet the impression of a slow, knowing, predatory smile was absolute, terrifying. I pivoted, abandoning the car, abandoning the job, and walked away into the night. This motel room, 3 states distant, offers no sanctuary. I arrived by bus, shedding the automotive anchor. It makes no difference. The lights here hum and fade unpredictably. The television broadcasts only swirling snow. Last night, waking suddenly in the pre-dawn chill, I saw intricate ice crystals feathering the inside of the window pane. The temperature in this room plummets now, defying the thermostat. That scent, unmistakable, cold earth and decay, bleeds faintly beneath the door. The corners of the room seem to deepen, gathering shadow, becoming recesses of impenetrable black. It has followed, it's attaching. Whatever slipped into my car that night wasn't interested in the machine, it was interested in the driver. Soon, I know, a reflection, in polished chrome, in window glass, in the dark screen of my laptop, will show not me, but it sitting where I should be. And when that happens, when I inevitably blink, it will be Elias who vanishes. I am posting this narrative, a final message in a bottle tossed into the digital sea, and then I must try to run again. But I feel it drawing closer, a palpable pressure, a chilling certainty, and I understand, with a clarity that freezes the soul, that eventually there will be nowhere left to run.